Welcome to Therapy Sessions, Cutting Toxic Family Ties. My name is Dr. Sherry Campbell, and I'm your host. I am a leading expert in the niche of toxic family abuse, and although my show cannot substitute for therapy, it is a survivor-based show. In me, you're not only going to get an expert, but you're also going to get a survivor, as I have also survived toxic family abuse. I know how hard it is. The goal I have is to give voice to the voiceless, to provide skills to help you to protect your peace, to stand your solid ground, and to navigate and heal the heartbreaks caused by toxic family. Please have a pen and paper available to give voice to your thoughts as you listen to each show. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for your bravery. So let the healing begin. Welcome back, everyone, to Therapy Sessions, Cutting Toxic Family Ties. And I am here with Jordan Pickell. She is someone that I've met through social media. And of course, like all my guests, I just love her. But we have been kind of knowing each other online for a while. I remember when you first started following me and I was noticing your posts, and I love your work. And I'm really, really excited to have you on because you're going to talk to us today about enmeshment, which it's not talked about enough, in my opinion. I don't know that everyone really gets what it is, or even if you're being enmeshed, that you get that you're being enmeshed. So before we start, Jordan, tell us about yourself, all the things.
Sure. Well, first I want to say thank you for having me on. I have been recommending your books to clients for years. And it wasn't until actually my clients are the ones that told me about your podcast. So I also really love your podcast, and I'm very excited to be on. And to share a little bit about me, I am a registered clinical counselor in private practice in Vancouver, Canada. I work with individuals, couples, family members, friends. Like, you'd be surprised how many friends come in for therapy because their families of origin impact how they are in other relationships. So while they might not be in contact with their families, they have stuff to work through with friends. I have 2 children. They're both school aged. So I have an 8-year-old and a 5-year-old. And for me, parenthood has been maybe some of the most, other than my clients, the most educational in understanding myself, understanding my relationship with my family and parents in general, and what childhood trauma, complex trauma can look like and show up in their development. I also have a podcast for therapists called Edge of the Couch, and that's for therapists who want to talk about kind of the messier parts of therapy. The nuances of therapy, which I love, but it is a very different audience than the one that I write for on Instagram, where I talk about complex trauma, dysfunctional family relationships, enmeshment, relational trauma, things like that, boundary setting. And then I'm also writing a book on enmeshment for adults who are also still enmeshed with their families of origin.
Well, I just cannot wait to dive in. And I just want to tell you, I mean, I didn't know about your podcast until right now, but there's a show called Shrinking. And it's a series on Netflix. And it's so nice to finally see a show humanizing the therapist, that we have personal lives, that we have emotions, that we're not perfect, all of these things. That's so great that you're doing that show because it is messy. It's so messy. And
it brings up our stuff.
Yes.
I think, like you said before we started recording, so many of us came to this work because of our own stuff. And so that comes up when you're working with clients. You see yourself reflected in their stories. There are ways that there are similarities and ways that there are differences. And we have to be really aware of our own stuff as we're doing this work.
And I think too, when we graduate patients or we lose patients, that we hurt, that we are not just sitting in a room with someone analyzing them, that this is a human being sitting in front of us. Like, I just terminated a long-term patient. She's been with me for 8 years, but she's ready to go. And she's been a huge part of my life. And I'm so proud of her. And the send-off is beautiful. But I will miss her.
Yeah.
she's touched my life too. And I don't think people really understand that. So I am so excited. I hope there are lots of therapists that follow me. So I hope, knowing that gives a little bit of traction for you on that show, because that sounds phenomenal. And you are phenomenal. And so today I do want to dive into enmeshment. One, I'm kind of curious, like, Jordan, how did you get into this niche of enmeshment or toxic family, CPTSD, stuff like that? What inspired you toward this niche? Because it's a dark space.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I'm an eldest daughter of an eldest daughter of an eldest daughter. Yes. So it's
Wow.
3 generations. We know how that works across generations. I grew up the sensitive, smart, emotional little therapist. And it's not a coincidence that I do this, as I've made it into a profession. But for people like me, they feel emotionally responsible for the emotional stability of their caregivers, right? So it's something that I'm skilled at. And I think I stumbled into at the same time that my clients started coming to me with their families of origin, which is a very common thing in therapy. But in reflecting and unpacking things for myself and then also for clients, people just start to gravitate towards you based on your own history, based on what you're good at. And then I started writing about it. And as I wrote about it, then more and more people came to me with those perspectives. So I've sort of stumbled into it organically, but now it's very much the center of my work.
I so appreciate that explanation, because I do think that we attract where we're at.
Yes.
And I feel like every therapist has their own unique niche of people they attract. And I think that it's almost like a magnetism between whatever your core wounds are, is sort of the language you speak. And then I do think it attracts that type of clientele to you. And I think it's so beautiful that it happens that way, because then we are matched up in alignment with someone who really gets it. I get a lot of people who've gone to other therapists under this toxic family dynamic, and they try to apply very rigid family systems treatment for them, and they're feeling unheard. They're feeling like they're not being understood, and they do want to go to somebody that gets it. And I think that writing puts an expert out there in a new way to a broader group. And then I think it draws people to you. I think your generational eldest is so interesting. What behaviors do you see in yourself where you recognize you were trying to be the caretaker? And do you feel like that was put on you, or do you feel like it was something that you just naturally did as the eldest daughter?
I think it's a little bit of both. As when I think about enmeshed, especially adultified, let's say, therapized children.
Yeah.
Yeah, that there is an emotional maturity, there is a sensitivity, and I think a natural sense of empathy for folks. And then when you have an adult who maybe feels who doesn't have a lot of people to turn to, and you have this kid who's sensitive, I think naturally, let's say I'm an emotional person. I grew up in a family of emotional people. You have somebody who's upset, who's crying. Then you have a child like me goes, "What's wrong?
Let me
Tell me
help
what's
you."
wrong." And then the adult sharing things that maybe
They
is maybe inappropriate to share with a child, maybe too much for a child, but because seeming more mature, that, oh, this kid can handle this. This kid maybe seems more mature for their age, so I can share these things, not knowing just because I speak the way that I speak and show up the way that I show up doesn't mean that I have the emotional understanding, that I actually have the maturity to be able to hold those things. So it was rewarded. And then I became more that way. And I was very proud. And it wasn't until I was, eyeballs deep in this profession that I realized, oh, wait, let me trace that back. What happened in my own family history that got to me where I am? That's how it's become clear to me.
That
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense, because I was definitely enmeshed, but hated.
That can happen.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was hated, but enmeshed. So I was thrown in the middle of like affairs I had to
Mm-hmm.
catch the stepdad having the affair. I had to confront him. I had to go to the lawyer meetings. I was put in the middle of really awful things that I wasn't mature enough. And I honestly think that my sensitivity was so hyper attuned, but
Mm-hmm.
I was put in the middle of so many different things, like in between parents, in between step parents. It was so hard. And whatever offered help I gave was used against me. So it
Yes.
was
Right.
such an interesting place to be, where I think you had a maturity in you that I had a sensitivity, but I was so fractured that I didn't have the maturity to be handling those things, but I was anyway. So I
Well, because you
felt
had to.
I had to, and I felt so compromised. And I feel like, you naturally have this way about you. And I could see how an adult might be like, oh, my daughter's mature enough to handle it. But then
Mm-hmm.
you look back and you're like, but I was 7,
Yeah.
or I was 10. I don't need to know about your financial problems. I don't need to know about your sexual issues in your partner. I don't need to know about your problems with my sibling. Like, it is crazy what happens when you get involved. And what I want you to talk about is you are rewarded. I was rewarded too.
Mm-hmm.
I was rewarded by one, and then I was scapegoated by another. But,
Yep.
there was some reward, right?
Mm-hmm.
How did that rewarding impact you? I mean, obviously it's reinforcing, right? But how did it impact your self image at that time? Were you like, I'm such a good girl, or I helped somebody? Like, explain that to us.
Yeah, I think it can be both. There can be a splitting, right? There's I'm the good girl, I'm smart, I'm mature, I feel loved and useful in this position. And then there's, because it's so rewarded, anytime you're smart, you're good, you're mature, there's also the split part of, but I'm not. I can't be this. This is too much for me. And because it's too much for me, that means I'm not smart. I'm not good. And I'm selfish and I feel guilty. And so those are things that it's really hard to undo, that there can be this shame, this guilt, and this anxiety. Like you were talking about being put in the middle. And that means you become hyper aware of the emotional stability of the people around you, because in order for me to be okay, when you're a kid, you need it for survival.
Oh, yeah.
The idea that your parents are emotionally unstable is threatening to your very survival. So I need to do everything I can. I'm going to rise to the occasion
Yeah.
to be able to make sure everyone is okay. And even if you have the capacity or you don't, because we're kids, we may not be able to meet that. Our parents are going to be unstable if they already are that. A kid cannot make their parents stable. That's kind of a myth.
Mm-hmm.
But it still gets ingrained of, I need to do this thing. And so then I might do it. You might grow up and continue to do it with a caregiver or siblings or your partner, your friends. It can be a way that you start navigating all of your close relationships, that it is my role to be the confidant. And that's when I feel good. That's when I feel safe. And if somebody's not coming to me, rather than being like, oh, great, they're boundaried, they're turning to their therapist or to their other friends, there's oh, they must not like me. Oh, I must not be valuable in this friendship, this relationship. And that can feel really destabilizing and really like, what is my role here? Because that's all I know.
Yeah, it's like in one of my books, I talk about how I think it's adult survivors of emotionally abusive parents, but you're really more valued for being useful.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you have to bring something to the table. And then you get this idea as a child, like, well, if they're not happy, I'm definitely not going to be happy. So if I can make them happy, then I can be happy. And you
Mm-hmm.
really learn this other centered view where you are just currying favor to making this parent happy and trying to be good and trying to make sure that if they're happy, because otherwise you live in this fear of your happiness. When I was growing up, I realized that happiness was too big of an ask. If I even felt relief, I thought that was happiness. If I just felt some type of relief, and if I could provide that for them, and I could be good, right, then I would have achieved something. And I was rewarded when I was doing their bidding, the more
Mm-hmm.
useful I was. So I think you're right. Like, as you then grow up into other relationships, you see your role as the giver, as useful, as you have
Mm-hmm.
to be doing and be perfect and be the one they call. And, it's a lot of pressure because you're right. On the other side of that, if you're not getting that, you can feel like you don't exist. You can feel like
Right.
you have no identity, that you have no value or no importance, and I think too, when you look at masculine or feminine energies, for about 10 years ago, I didn't do anything but study men because there's really no coursework on male psychology. At least when I went through my PhD, there wasn't even one class. I mean, I'm 53, so almost 54. So that was a long time ago. But I studied men, and then I got really passionate about studying masculine and feminine energies. And I had realized that this overgiving, overdoing, overpleasing, being there for everyone was a very masculine trait that did also provide me a false sense of control. Because if I was giving, then I was the one doing, and that would make me feel safe. But receiving or not doing or waiting was like horrifying for me to learn because I couldn't feel myself if I wasn't being useful. So I
Mm-hmm.
love that you put that word to enmeshment because I feel like you are really only valued if you're useful. And then
Yeah.
that split. What if I'm not? Right. You
Yeah.
talk on your social media about, and I love it's like a little tagline and I love it. You're going from enmeshment to estrangement. Would
Mm-hmm.
you unpack that for us?
Yeah, as you know, people can decide to have there's a spectrum, right?
Mhm.
Enmeshment to estrangement, closeness to the point of we're one person to we're severed. We're strangers. And then for some folks, it's you're dead to me. You do not exist.
Mhm.
You are not in my world. And to me, all of those are valid. Well, all of their at varying degrees of healthiness.
Yes.
And so much of it is what is the actual impact? How does it align with both my personal values, my personal integrity, and then also my feelings, my body sensations? What is okay? What does my body tolerate and what does it not? And so those things I think come across in therapy. Folks who are enmeshed go to therapy and often have no idea. They
Mhm.
think they grew up in a loving family, that they have a secure role, and that their family is special in ways that other families aren't. Or they might be in a place of burnout. My mom is very invasive. Maybe I feel a lot of pressure. I feel a lot of guilt. And so those ways we can unpack what are the family relationships, what is the arrangement of the family relationships, and how are you able to be separate? Your feelings, your needs,
Mhm.
your decisions can be different, that your family can be disappointed. And as we unpack those things, like, oh, actually when I go into my body is telling me that there's a sense of invasion, a sense of that I'm not a full self, that I'm kind of this receptacle for other people. So those things we have to unpack in therapy or in your own personal work. And as you do that, we can find what feels more authentic in terms of our bottom up, our feelings, our body sensations, and also the top down. What are my values? For some families, it might be loyalty,
Mhm.
appearance, achievement, um, family first.
Mhm.
And when I look at my own personal values, it might be authenticity, independence. There might be closeness with family, but it's more boundaried than I was taught or more boundaries than I thought. And so through the course of therapy or this personal work, I can find a more authentic, a more chosen relationship with my family. What feels right for me, what feels true to me, what works for me. And that can change over time. And people can swing. When you are enmeshed with your family, it is often like, oh, they are so invasive to my life that for a lot of folks, they need to create significant distance with their family before they can get the clarity of what do I feel, what's important to me, because otherwise any closeness, it's like a magnet. I get completely bulldozed when I'm near my family. So I have to create all of these boundaries until I can get clarity about what feels right, what feels healthy for me.
I love that because it is on a spectrum. I ended up in this no contact area kind of alone. I sort of started this in the family realm with my book, But It's Your Family, because it really wasn't talked about very much and definitely not by an expert, right? So, but I think there's so much more than no contact. I think there's so many different flavors. And the thing about enmeshment is that when you do start setting the boundaries, the enmeshed party who's wanting the enmeshment does not usually react very well, right? For example, let's say that a son is enmeshed with his mother and then he meets the woman of his dreams.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then what happens is that mother-in-law turns that woman into Satan. She's changed you. And by all accounts, until he met this woman, he thought he had the best mom. She always put the kids first. And, maybe he was the golden child even, but he was taking care of everybody, loaning them money, helping them along the way, whatever it was. But the moment that he went and found love, that enmeshed mother, this is just one example, but just to make it clear for the...
No, it's a great example. Yeah.
It's like then all of a sudden he loses the relationship, or there's a threat, or she's being mean to the wife, making odd comments like, he used to hug me like that, just strange things that are going on. And I feel like it's all of a sudden you pop into this, oh my God, what I thought was healthy is not healthy because now I'm being abandoned because I'm having a natural, normal course of healthy development. I have found the woman of my dreams, and that's going to make me now lose my mother, right? Like that is such a classic case. That happens in step families even, right? It's like a new stepmom comes in and there's a daughter and she hates the daughter because the stepmom has to come first. And then whoever is wanting the independence gets such a kickback and threats, and they threaten loss, but they're holding on at the same time with their magnetic pull because they're only threatening the loss to bait you back. They're inducing these feelings of abandonment. And I think that it's so hard when you are enmeshed and you're trying to create that space. You almost have to tiptoe out, like I got to get out, and you create it gradually. I have found, and one of my little slogans is just shut your mouth and use your feet. Get your body right.
That's such a great phrase.
If you think about it, Jordan, like your words really don't work with people that are really controlling or narcissistic or enmeshing of you. They don't want to hear your words. And they're so good at gaslighting and baiting and projecting and getting you so head spun that you just go back to factory settings. And you're like, well, I'm just better to stay here, I guess. So I think sometimes setting boundaries doesn't even need a word to shut your mouth and just gradually move your feet, respond less, come over less, practice all of that, see what kind of response you get. And that will help you move through those varying levels of enmeshment. Now, in the extreme examples that I gave, oftentimes you end up going no contact because this enmeshed parent is destroying your marriage or destroying your life.
Right.
Blaming everyone but herself, right? And that can go each way. It could be dads, it could be whatever. I just wanted to give a clear example of what enmeshment would look like on an extreme level. I think there's so much identity work you have to do, right? In enmeshment. I think when you're enmeshed, you start to feel like your identity is being squashed and you can't be fully expressed. And then yet you've never not been enmeshed to know how to. So what is that process like, right? Like you've never not been enmeshed and now you're you and you're like, oh God, who am I? Right? What is that process of identity work like?
Right. Well, I want to go back to your example of the son with his mother. And that when I think about that son, there's a sense of I am the good son. I provide for everyone, like you're saying, probably a good time, probably played the role that he was cast in. And then to meet the woman of his dreams, that there can be this crisis point of, wait a second, my mom isn't who I thought. She isn't supportive of my relationship. And it can be this push and pull because often those men will try to make everyone happy. Like, I can try to make my wife or my girlfriend happy and my mom. And at some point, when mom is feeling threatened, and then there's more, like you're saying, these hooks trying to get in, like, oh,
Yes.
you don't love me anymore. Or,
Mhm.
oh, look at her. She's trying to pull you away from your family.
Yes.
You're better than that.
Yes.
That's not what I taught you.
Yes.
And so it can pull on these identities that he has about himself. So then how does he have the back of his partner, which can be really hard because it means, in the mother's eyes at least, that you are abandoning, you are betraying me. You're not who I taught you to be or who I thought you were. And then there's kind of this fall from grace, that there can be a scapegoating. There can be she brainwashed you against me. So again, the girlfriend or the wife is the devil, like you're saying. And so having to what did you say? Shut your mouth and use your feet.
Yeah.
That there can be a having to unpack.
Yeah.
I can be the good son and have my own life. And maybe if mom does not accept that I have my own life, then maybe there's okay, I need to create more distance, maybe even cut her off. Like, I have my own life now, and my allegiance is with my own family now.
No.
And that can be really hard for this mother to understand. And maybe she's able to adjust, and after some time kind of learn that the constellation can shift, the dance can shift. Right. But a lot of the time, if you're in a very rigidly enmeshed family, that there is a kind of split, and there is okay, I'm going to disappoint my family. I am now a disappointment for my mother.
Yep.
And how can I move through the guilt? How can I carve out my own identity as I am a good partner? I am creating a life for myself. I am strong. I can decide what is right for me. And that can be, again, it can really shake things up for people. You don't know I'm not the good son. Who am I? Oh, I must be bad. So there's a lot of different layers that you have to unpack until it's, I make the right decisions for myself.
Yeah.
I am in integrity with what is good to me. And it's okay if I disappoint mom.
Yeah, because mom's an adult and mom can take care of herself. And that's what I think the person who's been enmeshed doesn't trust, because they've depended on you for so long to take care of them. And you've accidentally enabled it because it was rewarding and you were the good son or the good daughter or whatever. And then you actually feel, and I had some of these feeling towards my own mom, is that she can't take care of herself. Like, she cannot be alone. And when she is alone, the acting out is so intense that I would just be complicit, because I just didn't want to have the intensity of the panic of being alone, right? So in the case of the son, it's like he has to go through so much confusion, and then also standing so strong for someone they're smearing. Like they smear, and they will involve, if they're highly dysfunctional and narcissistic, they'll involve all family to see this one person, this one new wife, as the scapegoat, and she's getting abused. And so now he feels responsible for her. He feels responsible for her pain. And enmeshment causes all of this. And this is so toxic and so unhealthy. I've never treated anyone that has gone no contact impulsively. It has been the large majority of my people spent decades. I was 4.5 decades abused. 45 years old, it took me, because it's so hard to get out from under the spider web. It's just when you think you got it all off, it's somewhere else. It's so hard to get out because your identity was never really allowed to just come together as a whole. You're developing while being enmeshed, and you're kind of doing your things. I guess, Jordan, that I just learned the hard way, that when I was trying to have rational conversations with my family members about my boundaries, it turned into an all-out war. And I was just so abused, and it just got me further stuck when I shut my mouth. I just used my feet. And I just put little slippers on, and I just walked through my life with slippers, not afraid, just quiet.
Yeah.
Just quiet. And then I would gray rock a lot to get out once I was like, first it was like high contact, then it was low contact, then it was cordial contact. But once they started this smear campaign, I kind of had to board up the house and hunker
Yeah.
down, because then they enmesh groups of people. And it is totally possible to enmesh groups of people where
Oh, yeah.
people are so complicit. Talk about that a little bit.
I think it often is a family dynamic. There may be two people, a whole family can be enmeshed where there's a ton of triangulation happening. As soon as someone makes an independent decision or, just does something that the family doesn't deem acceptable, that they no longer play that role, they use guilt, they use manipulation, they use anxiety to pull that person back in. And so there can be so much triangulation where when two people are in a conflict, they bring a third, a fourth, a fifth person. And it can seem innocent, right? It's like, oh, I need an ally. I need someone to talk to about the fact that I'm annoyed or that I'm in this conflict with this person. Sometimes parents can use somebody as a mediator and then they're being put in the middle. And again, somebody like me thinks, oh, look at me, I have this position and I can make the family better. So I'm going to pull maybe the person who's really trying to develop independence and I'm pulling them back into the family because I think, oh, we need to negotiate.
It's the right thing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the good thing to have a relationship with mom and my sibling. So I'm going to do everything I can. I'm going to use guilt. I'm going to use shame to try to get this person back in. And so the whole family can be trying to pull this person back in. And then at some point they can flip, right? So then they're going to use shame and alienating further the person. It's so funny how some people think that the shame is going to pull someone back in. And it when they're closer, it can that, oh, that's unacceptable. And the person goes, oh, okay, I'm going to come back and play the role. But then at some point you get enough distance and it's like, it actually doesn't make me want to have a relationship with you. The fact that you're shaming me, you think that I'm not a good person, you're doing this campaign against me, then I'm definitely not going to have a relationship with you.
Yeah,
so
it just further nails the head in the coffin, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I will even venture to say that, at least in my experience and a lot of what I've seen in my office, they will step outside the family dynamic. They'll involve neighbors. They'll call your best friend.
Yeah.
They'll reach out to your ex-husband. They will try to use your children. It's like all of a sudden the world that you knew, close family friends, neighbors, they're calling your best friend, they're reaching out to them. They'll go on social media and blast you to all the people they know. It is so wild what will happen. But to your point, what I love that you just said is that as you get space, I learned that when I stopped using this, I used this and this. And when I used my eyes and my ears, and not my mouth, again, shut your mouth, use your feet. My mouth did nothing good for me. It just got me in that conflict-ridden, gaslighting, spinner up. And then I go back to factory settings like, I guess 1 + 1 isn't 2. It's got to be the square root of 27 times 3 divided by 4. It's just not simple because rational thought doesn't work with these types of people. So when you get distance, and what I really want the listeners to understand is when you see and you hear, that is a much better source of truth. So like Jordan just said, the further away you get, the more shame they use. That might work in close proximity, but then it becomes, you're doing it to yourself. You yourself, enmeshing person, is ruining the relationship with me now because now I see the shame. Now I hear the shame and I've got distance to be clear about the shame. You yourself are driving this to no contact. Right? And I think too, like when you look at how great distance is it allows for you to have some level of mindfulness over what is going on in your body in a way that when you're so close and smushed up to it, you're ignoring your body because you're so worried about the predator in front of you. You're not paying attention to you. You are paying attention to them, and that is what they want. Right. Yeah. And so as you get that distance and it's like, oh, or it's like moving up to the second floor and the windows are bigger, you have a broader perspective than looking outside from the very ground floor. So it's the more perspective you can get, I think, the better that you can look at the enmeshment or the estrangement, right? Whatever's being created. And there are lots of colors in between. There's tons of different ways to do this, and it's going to be unique to you and your family dynamic. And that's what I love that you're saying, Jordan, is it isn't just a one size fits all. A lot of people who are not educated in toxic family systems believe that everything that we say, one blip in social media, that is representative of
Mm-hmm.
whole belief system. It's like, it's a post. So if it doesn't fit for you, scroll on, because other things might fit for you. What would you say for you in an enmeshed situation, either for yourself or what you see in other clients? Obviously, this has a very long-term effect, even once you're out, right? And I think that self-doubt is one of those effects, because you were only made to feel sure of yourself if you were being the useful little person. So what would you explain to the listeners as long-term effects for them to really look out for in this type of situation?
Sure. If you're currently enmeshed, you can be so disconnected from the truth of things. Like you're saying, it's so close. It's almost like your nose, where you can see it at the edges of your awareness, but you can't quite look at it directly. And so it often takes somebody else to see what's going on, whether it's a therapist, a friend, like you were talking about earlier, a new partner.
Yes.
It's going, what? This is not healthy. This is toxic right here.
Mm-hmm.
And so as usually somebody else bringing it to your attention, or you just get so burnt out and emotionally exhausted, something extreme happens, and it's like, oh, it just opens up your mind that something is very wrong here. And then as you do that you can notice the ways in which you distrust your own emotional experience. Like you were saying earlier, you aren't seeing what you're seeing. You're not hearing what you're hearing. You're just basing off your reality on what the other person's story is. You look to your parents or other people. You can be enmeshed with partners. You can be enmeshed with friends, but usually it's with parents or older siblings, where you're looking to your family for all of your decisions on what it means to be a good person. Should I go to this school or this school? Should I get this job or this job? Oh, you don't like this partner? I'll break up with them. So if you are realizing that your life, whether it's your life direction, it can also be everyday, like your just everyday decisions. It can be how much time you're spending with your family.
Mm-hmm.
Are you turning towards your family, towards your parents at the end of the day instead of your partner?
Mm-hmm.
You are in constant conversation with them. They know what you had for breakfast. They know what you had for lunch. They know what you had for dinner. They know what your schedule is. And again, from the outside, you can see this is a loving family. And it can work for a long time for people, that they can be in this dynamic for a really long time until they have their own family, or they want to make a decision that's very different than what is accepted by the family. Or they become burnt out and emotionally exhausted, and they no longer can play that role. So it kind of creates this upheaval in the family. But ultimately, if we're just looking on the individual level, there's a lot of guilt. There's a lot of sense of responsibility for the people around them, especially their caregivers and family of origin. There can be, I don't trust myself. I don't trust my decision making. So I turn to them to figure out what's right. And so if it's hard to create your own, to understand your own feelings, to make your own decisions, to reclaim your time, that your time is really, they are really kind of setting your schedule on, no, that's a waste of time. Don't do that. Come over for dinner. They're coming over. They're invading your personal space, your home. So if you look at your family of origin, how much space are they taking up in your life? How much space are they taking up in your brain, in your emotional capacity? How much investment are you having to put? How much emotional energy is being pulled there? And then how much is it for yourself, for making your own decisions, living your own life? So those can be some of the ways that it shows up. But again, it's so insidious. A lot of people play into that dynamic Again, it gives them a sense of identity, a sense of belonging, and they have this story. Other people from the outside might go, wow, look at that. You have such a close family. I'm jealous of the closeness that you have. I wish that I had that relationship. Then if you go into the emotion of it, I'm actually super drained. I actually feel guilty and overly responsible all the time. I'm privy to conversations that have nothing to do with me. These are things that can take a lot of time to unpack. So folks who are listening or watching this may, on the face of it, go, that's not me. That's not my family. Like you were saying, my family was actually really critical of me. So it didn't feel close. Okay, but what was the perspective of the parent? They might have saw you as their best friend, even if you don't feel that way. The fact that they see you that way, they treat you that way. So I hope that when people think of enmeshment, that it will take some, like you were saying, going to the second floor, looking at your family of origin, being open about what the actual dynamic is, because often people don't come to therapy going, I'm enmeshed with my family. It takes time to even figure out what's going on.
Learn that in therapy, right? They tend to learn that. I also think that siblings can enmesh other siblings. Like, I think it can go on all kinds of different dynamics. But I also feel like it is a covert form of bullying, to want ownership. And this happens mostly with parents, I think, to children, like they own you. No one owns anybody, right? You might be born to this family, but ownership, there's development, there's separating and individuating. There's all these developmental patterns that we're supposed to go through scientifically and psychologically. We're supposed to meet these milestones. And so when you're invading someone's life, that's a really covert form of bullying. It's not the bullying and the taunting that you might see that you would see on TV or in a high school, a movie. But covert bullying is about pressure and fear. There's a dominating force, and this dominating force is putting pressure and fear and guilt and shame into you so that you respond to them and you become very predictable to them so they can continue bullying or enmeshing. I've always felt the enmeshment of my parents to be very bullying. There was always gossip involved in the enmeshment. There was triangulation involved in it. There was some big decision that was being scapegoated onto me to make for the enmeshed person. That way they never have to be responsible if the decision I advise them to do, right? So I think that it is a covert form of bullying, even if that parent is coming from a place of they think that's love. To own another person and to not allow them to fly, to clip their wings, is not love. That is still a form to me of a covert bullying, invasive ownership type of things. We want our children to feel free. We want them to go through a process of development of their finding their own identity. We're not choosing their careers. We're not choosing their friends. We're not choosing their clothes. We're not choosing what college they go to. We can help support all of those things, but for our children to know themselves very well, to have their own identity, we've got to have a frame around them, but they should move freely within the frame. They get older, that frame should get wider and bigger until there's no more frame, right? I feel like children love us the most as their parents when we allow them the freedom to be who they are.
Yes,
Instead of
when we see
they
them.
love us because they have to. We're forcing them to.
Yeah. Yeah, I find in my own parenting, one thing I have to be careful of, especially having an eldest daughter like me,
Oh my gosh.
is when you have a same gender child, it brings up your own memories and you want things to be different than how you were growing up. But something I do have to be careful of is having a sensitive kid and like a naturally empathic kid, a naturally mature kid, and being the emotional, I grew up as an emotional kid. I'm an emotional adult. I cry easily. And so as a therapist, I'm like, oh, it's good for my kids to see that their parent is a flawed person, that I apologize, that I can have emotion, that emotion is normal, but it's so easy to tip into, to share, this is why I'm crying, and just giving a little bit more responsibility that is inappropriate, that an 8-year-old is not meant to emotionally support her parent. right? And
Yeah.
so it can be so easy. I just think I'm having a conversation. I just think I'm talking about what's coming up for me, and I'm being a good parent because I'm being transparent. But you have a sensitive kid, you can create this dynamic. And again, I can reward it. Wow, I have such a good kid. You're such a good kid. You're such a good listener. And so I have to be really careful. I am responsible for my feelings. I so appreciate you asking me, and it's not your responsibility.
Yeah, I've been a single mom with my daughter. She's 20 now and just doing phenomenal. And she is such a high level little spirit and always has been. So being a single mom with no buffer, no place to escape if I was sad, no husband, no distraction, she always knew when I was crying. But what I would tell her was, I am in therapy. But yes, I remember I had this complete meltdown over DirecTV. Okay, I am not techie. And I was on the phone for hours and I felt like I was getting run in circles and my bandwidth was just starting to, I was just starting to just lose my shit because I don't even speak the language. You know what I mean? So I'm flat on my face, bawling on my bed. My daughter's 11. She's like rubbing my back. And I'm like, London, you don't have to take care of me. I'm just not techie. And I have a therapist and I'm about it there, but I love you and I appreciate you caring. I'm a single mom. I can't really hide this from you. And she goes, yeah, mom, you're really not good at technology. I'm like, I'm really, really not. And luckily it was over something very benign. But what was deeper under there that I didn't share with her is, it made me feel very alone because I didn't have a man in my life at that time. And I was going through a breakup and I knew that had he been there, the TV would have been fine. So I was in a grieving process when this happened. And that's when I just said, I'm flat on my face. It's bigger than the TV, but I have my therapist to talk about that. And I told my therapist, I'm like, oh my God, I'm fucking up my kid.
Right. So yeah. You can go there.
Carrie, you are not fucking up your kid. You are showing her what it's like to be frustrated to the nth degree about something so benign. And she's like, and the fact that your daughter knows that you cry and knows that you get help. So my daughter earlier this year is like, I think I want to go to therapy. And I was like, excellent. We found her a therapist. She's been going for about a year now. She loves it. She loves her therapist. I love her therapist. And I love that in being human, but not making her responsible for it. And I think that's what I want the listeners to know. You can be human. It's just not something that you want your kid to fix for you or have them be your listener. There might be circumstances where, let's say you've got cancer or you're going through a horrible divorce and you're going to cry and you can't help it. There's ways to say, I'm crying because I'm hurt over this, but it is not your responsibility to help or fix me. But I appreciate love. I'm so glad you're in my life, but I will handle this in a therapist office. And I've always done those things. And we are not doing any damage because there is that boundary that you talked about, Jordan, where you reassure your child, you have somewhere else to go with that, right? But you appreciate that they're there and they're seeing it. And you're in a place where emotions aren't always that easy to control. And you're real. And I think that balance is hard to navigate when you've come from a toxic family because so much was dumped on you because you don't want to do the opposite either. You don't want to withhold all of your humanity from your children and then perform as this perfect parent because then you're not human to your kids. Right. So I love that you brought that up because I think a lot of people struggle with that one. I think that they're like, well, how much is too much? I think you can share the skeleton. Like I'm struggling over DirecTV. And it's not about you and I'm just frustrated. But I have a therapist I can talk to about this and I absolutely will. But I appreciate you loving me and being here. You are so special to me. And you can reward, but you're not rewarding them for anything other than they're witnessing you. Like if my daughter witnessed one of her friends crying like that, I would want her to have the same reaction to her that she did to me. It's just compassion. So enmeshment and compassion are different. And I think this example makes it much more clear to the listener. Jordan, this went so fast. I like literally can't even believe it. But what would you leave the listeners with? Like they feel uncomfortable, they feel their boundaries are violated. They think about seeing their parent and their hackles go up. They've got to arm themselves to go in, but they're not aware that there's an enmeshing dynamic going on. How can someone start to recognize those types of things?
Mm-hmm. Well, hopefully in listening to this conversation, there can be, do you notice any resonance in your body? Because if you are in an enmeshed family, there can be a lot of defenses that it can be really scary and destabilizing to recognize enmeshment. So just softening around, well, how were you actually treated? How are you treated right now? What actually feels right? You don't necessarily have to villainize to say that they're bad in terms of your family, looking at your parents and swing in a direction. It's more about curiosity and looking at my family values versus my personal values, looking at how much energy and time am I spending with my parents versus in my own life, and how do I feel about that balance? And so for folks who are listening, you don't have to rush to label your experiences, but it's really about, I think with the language, we can get clear on, it's nice to have a name for something when it's true, but it can take us a while to get to that place about what language feels right to talk about my own personal experience. And you might use the language of enmeshment, you might use something else, and all of that is fine. It's more about getting to the accuracy of what feels right for you and what's helpful. And so I think enmeshment is a framework, is language that people don't, this is a very unfamiliar term, I think, right now. And so I'm hoping with the book that I'm writing and what I see folks like you doing, speaking to this experience so that people can have just a little bit more awareness of what's actually happening, because so much of this is insidious. And so it can take time and it can take softening around the defenses to really see what's going on.
Yeah. And when bullying looks nice and you're rewarded for it, but you're complicit to another person's power, that is so confusing to work through. Right. And I love that whatever word works for you, it's more about just getting to the core of what the issue is and what feels right for you. For example, I really don't use the word forgiveness. It just doesn't work in the equation of what I'm living, but I really favor the word acceptance. Right. And so that doesn't mean I'm an unforgiving person. It just means that word doesn't apply to making me feel I'm at the core of what my issue is. But if I think about radical acceptance, that does bring me to the core of what my issue is. And so it is, words and semantics are really important in this field because we're all experiencing this as a very unique human being. What words might work for someone else don't work for another person. And there should be no shame around that, right? Invasive is another word like you used. It's an invasion. Is another word for enmeshment, or there could be covert bullying. Someone's having control and power over you. You feel
emotional entanglement. Yeah.
Yes.
Emotional incest is a parentification, triangulation, some of this language. Yeah. Codependency.
Yes.
Is another common one.
Yeah. And I like to veer away from that word of
Me too.
codependency. And I'm so glad you do too, because there's some kind of shame or punishment that has been toggled onto that word. And sometimes the word forgiveness gets some shame and punishment around it. I try to stay away from any word that is shaming, judging, or punishing, because the person who's enmeshed or the one who's codependent, this is a really nice person who's really tolerating quite a bit, is a very strong, resilient person trying to do the right thing. And then we add this negative connotation. And that's what I love about your work, Jordan, is I think enmeshment brings relief away from this, you're codependent, right? It's gotten such a negative label. And I think that the whole part of getting into therapy is about setting yourself free. And I think enmeshment is a softer approach to accepting yourself and what your situation is, you know? So I'm so excited about your book. So I'm going to have you on again when your book drops. So everyone will look really forward to that. And I'm so proud of you and I'm so happy for you. And thank you so much for sharing my work with people and for coming on my show. Everyone's going to love this show. because it isn't talked about enough. And I'm so proud that you're going to go out there and start putting real words to sort of a secret dynamic. And I adore you, Jordan. Thank you so much for coming on Therapy Sessions.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, guys. I hope you enjoyed this show. I'm sure you did. So until I see you in the next couple weeks, be well. Take care of you. Well, Bravehearts, that concludes our amazing therapy session for the day. Please sign up on my email list at drsherrycampbell.com so that you can be in touch with me and see what's going on in terms of what I'm offering soon, what books are coming out, etc. Talk to you in a couple of weeks.